For much of this nation's history, education for all has been a priority. While not perfect by any means, the byproduct of the United States education system was the development of a huge middle class that had gained the knowledge and ability to not only find a portion of the American dream, but to also be the engine for economic prosperity. But over the last several generations, something has become broken. The U.S. middle class has not experienced economic expansion for the last 3 decades. Today, record numbers of high school and college graduates are finding it impossible to find a job. Many are discovering they have not been properly equipped by their education for the few jobs that are available. Employers are equally frustrated at the lack of qualified job applicants. A change is clearly needed. And a change has dawned. There are places in this country where education is being rethought. There are programs being developed where government, industry, and education are coming together to forge new ideas that are propelling America on the way forward.
Hi, I'm Mary Owens of Owens Estate and Wealth Strategies Group. When we were taught American history as a young child, there was one theme that was taught over and over. The United States was a land of opportunity. Immigrants flocked here because they realized if they could just get to our soil, they had a chance at having a life that was middle class. They could start out poor, but they knew they had opportunity. They had a chance of having a piece of happiness and a pursuit of being not only successful, but to see their children do that as well. They no longer had to worry about a situation where I can barely feed my children. They knew if they could just arrive at our shore, they would have opportunities they would never have anywhere else in the world. Now, what created this opportunity? United States had something that no other country had before. Its leaders from the very early ages of the formation of our country insisted that education needed to be there for all. Now, it wasn't perfect when we first started it, and we've done a lot of things to amend it and improve it. But at early stages, even if you were poor, if you were middle class, or you were well off, you had a chance at getting an education that allowed you to compete in your industry or in your town or in your community to have a job that was going to allow you to succeed. One of the areas the United States focused a lot of effort and financial funding was recognizing that in the United States we really had 2 tracks of career opportunities. Those who wanted to go the traditional route of going off to college, but equally as important, they recognized and funded those types of classes needed to have opportunities in the trades, career technical education. We offered classes as early as 8th grade and then into high school, things like drafting, metal shop, woodworking, construction trades. So by the time a young person came out of high school, if they didn't choose to go to college, they still had usable job skills. They could get a job fairly readily because the employer wasn't looking at them and saying, "What can you do?" They actually could demonstrate what they had done in the classroom. Now, that system allowed the manufacturing boom and the Industrial Revolution in the United States to be successful. We had 2 key elements, what we needed to make the Industrial Revolution successful. We had technical workers, and we also had those at a college such as engineering school. Together, they were able to bring the Industrial Revolution to the successful forefront of American history and create the wide, broad middle class. Now, when we look back, we began to realize over time things started to change. A couple things occurred. First off, we did start to lose manufacturing jobs. We lost them through a variety of trade deals, and we had cheap labor overseas, which started to pull them away. So because of that, some of the focus on the technical training started to wane somewhat. But we had other influences as well that actually were equally as damaging to the technical side. The Vietnam War. One of the policies the United States adopted that said, if you want to avoid the draft, if you go to college, you'll be exempt from the draft. However, if you go to a career technical school, you won't be. We actually, by that policy, put a different standard on worth on those two different career paths. Something now we look at and realize that was wrong. We need to rethink that. But with those combinations, we also started to defund our educational system slowly over decades. It was highly dependent upon a single source of revenue, normally property taxes. And with that, we created additional administrative burdens, and now the educational system was struggling to pay its bills. So what got cut? The career technical education piece. And with that, what we created was something that they weren't expecting. We now had two classes of people coming out of high school. Those that were going off to college and had lots of opportunity, and those that were coming out of high school and looked around and said, what in the world am I going to do to get a job? I don't have any usable skill sets. The U.S. educational system needs to rethink its approach. We all need to rethink education in order for the middle class to flourish again. The most useful asset in any economy is a large workforce with usable skill sets. An employed middle class creates social stability, lower taxes, and reduced welfare burdens. A large middle class creates things we all long for in our society. So what do we need to do to fix the current dilemma? It needs to be addressed quickly. We are about to show you what can happen when government, business, and educational leaders work in concert. A symphony of opportunity emerges where all the players are on the same stage with a common sheet of music. We started this investigation by asking economics professor David Rowland Host of UC Berkeley to rejoin us and give us his insights into the current deficiencies in the U.S. educational system and how it has impacted the U.S. worker over the last several decades. As usual, his explanation hit right to the heart of the matter. This is a structural issue that takes longer to, one, correct, and two, to have the benefit from the economic impact. But that is the United States. Our scores in science and math, they're continuing to decline, and the rate of descent is accelerating. Your pool of recruits that are going to come in, that disparity between the foreign student who has a much larger pool and we're getting the creme de la creme versus the U.S. student, that disparity is going to grow, and that actually is going to create the classroom issue is more challenging as well.
It's very challenging already. I mean, foreign students and so-called model minorities, if you want to call them that, in my public university system have become a kind of challenge because they set an example that we haven't been able to equal in the rest of the population. And that's not to diminish their accomplishments in any way, but it really presents us with a challenge to raise the standards of the average students. And in America, I would say this is our biggest dilemma in terms of our future competitiveness and our ability to sustain our living standards in a global economy. As you know, since the 1970s, the labor market in the United States kind of bifurcated. It's split into two parts, unskilled workers and skilled workers. Skilled workers are doing fine. You know, they're buying fancy condos in downtown San Francisco and pumping up the real estate market there. But unskilled workers are no better off than they were in the 1970s. 35 years 40 years of economic growth for the U.S. economy hasn't translated into higher average wages for unskilled workers. And the reason for this, I mean, there's been a lot of economic research to try to explain this. For a long time, people were blaming globalization and international trade, the Chinese workers and so on. That's not really what is causing this problem. That's like the tail wagging the dog. The U.S. imports and exports are only in the low teens of GDP. So you can't explain this overall problem of inequality this way in the labor market. The most convincing explanation is technology. And that is that technology has a kind of a perverse relationship with skilled and unskilled workers.
Yes.
Technology is what economists call a substitute for unskilled workers. That's the old automation argument.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
These are the simpler tasks, and they can be more easily mechanized. But with skilled workers, technology is actually what we call a complement, which means if you have more technology, you need more skilled workers. And so the advent of technology across the U.S. has really intensified the demand for skilled workers. But the demand for unskilled workers has remained relatively flat. And the only effective response to this is to improve the skill sets of the unskilled.
Of the worker, yes.
We have to do that. And if all you need to do is look at the economies that are the most competitive, whether it's Singapore, Germany, Switzerland, they figured this out. This is education policy. It's not immigration policy. It's not technology policy. It's about education. Because in the modern global economy, where capital can go anywhere it wants, the only justification for higher wages is higher productivity. And we've got to increase worker productivity through skill-intensive education.
And the skill-intensive education doesn't necessarily have to be a college degree.
Not at all.
If you can take that technology and marry the education with the unskilled worker to work with the technology, they can become competitive and be paid more.
No, that's absolutely right. Yeah, I think that ironically, I mean, I'm in the business of college education, but I think there's a way in which we put too much pressure on universities to solve this problem. There are two other areas we really need to look. One is pre-college education.
Yes.
The U.S. is really lagging, not as much in university level education, but in K through 12 and even preschool. By global standards, I mean, there are lots of lists and statistics, and we can say we're number this or number that, but the simple fact is the countries we want to compare ourselves to, the high-income countries around the world, the U.S. is pretty much stuck in the middle in terms of educational outcomes, on average. And the main driver of that is K through 12. We're just not preparing children in elementary and high school to use the higher education system or the workplace to develop skills. So that's the first problem. Let's look behind college and figure out ways to improve outcomes in K through 12 across the country. There's tremendous inequality, as you know, in the application of those early education resources.
Enormous inequality.
And it's a really serious challenge for us. It's not about taxing the rich. I mean, if you want to deal with inequality, don't deal with the symptoms. Deal with the cause. The cause of inequality is the unequal distribution of skills.
Yes.
Because ultimately, your livelihood for most people is determined by
your skill sets
and your productivity. Absolutely. And if you've been very successful, congratulations. If you're upper middle class or middle class, you're also happy. But still, all of this is essentially traceable to your skills. And if we want to overcome these challenges, and inequality is a really significant challenge. I'm an economist, so I don't have to look at inequality from an ethical perspective. I might dislike it or whatever, but this is not the issue. Inequality is bad for the economy. It's bad for the economy for two fundamental reasons. Firstly, it polarizes society, and that makes governance much more difficult. It's much harder to agree about policies that will advance society because you have essentially these interest groups that are very polarized. And there are endless examples of this, but it's very clear that societies with less inequality have an easier time deciding how to move forward, how to invest in public resources, how to carry forward their policies. The second problem with inequality is that it's bad for economic growth. We learned in the New Deal, when we got ourselves out of the Depression, we learned that without a middle class, you can't sustain the momentum of economic growth.
There is no long-term successful country
No,
without a
absolutely not.
sizable middle class that is
That's
successful.
the engine of sustainable growth. You've got to have a
Absolutely.
middle class. And so when the middle class is threatened, it doesn't just threaten them, it threatens the highest income groups in society
It
because
threatens everyone.
at the end of the day, that's where their money comes from. I mean, ask yourself, what does Warren Buffett invest in? He invests in middle class commodities. He invests in the mainstream
Of America.
American retailing. And without a middle class, that's going to go away. And it's beginning to falter already. So the U.S. has gotten momentum because of its flexibility and adaptability, but sustaining growth requires that the middle class really be the engine of growth. So this inequality issue is something we've got to overcome, and there are ways to do it. We can look around at lots of different economies. I don't like to use examples of Nordic economies, even though they've got very high standards of living. They tend to be politically what some people refer to as socialistic. But let me give you a good example of a very successful economy, and that's Germany.
Yes.
Germany has a completely different strategy for education, and
Yes,
it's exactly what you were alluding to. They don't just focus on college graduates. They have a vocational education system that doesn't leave anybody behind. I mean, literally. If you go to high school and you don't go to college, you're still going to get training that's marketable. And they invest in marketable skills through vocational training from the age of 12 or 14. They begin to move students in one of those directions. Their college-prepared workers are just like ours. They look just like us. The biggest difference is in this vocational development system. And we're at a huge disadvantage because we essentially say bye-bye to people who go to high school or maybe don't even finish high school. You're on your own. What we don't seem to recognize, or maybe we're not willing to recognize yet, is that worker productivity is an asset to the entire economy. It's an asset to every employer, every investor, everybody who wants to rely on American competitiveness needs
It's
us
probably
to have
the
productive
most
workers.
important economic asset the United States
It's the
has.
bedrock of higher living standards because at the end of the day, it's worker productivity. I mean, I'll use the example of Germany again. German auto workers are the highest paid auto workers in the world. And yet, the world can't get enough of their cars. I mean, they're super competitive. And it's not because of cost, it's because their productivity is so high.
And the quality.
And the quality is so high. That's right. And so as long as you pursue a skill-intensive education policy, everybody in the economy can benefit.
But even having educational policies isn't enough. Sometimes we have unintended consequences. Vietnam War, and we gave a deferment for those young men that were going to college.
Right.
We did not give a deferment to those young men going to a technical trade school.
No, that's true. That's true.
So you were actually, by that policy, placing more value on a college-educated student. How sad that we did that.
It is sad, yeah.
But we actually did start the process of this, because by doing that, we also then took away the profitability of our technical trade schools because there were fewer students willing to go there.
That's true. Yeah, it didn't provide any protection from military service. I mean, one thing I have to say for the military is they are a source of technical skill development, even though they might be
they are.
not the first choice of many. But you're absolutely right. The technical training systems need to be given relatively equal status. And I would go even further. I would follow the models of Germany and Switzerland, where basically no potential worker is left behind. You really make this part of a public education strategy.
Yes.
Which is focused not on the lofty ideals of the ivory tower, because that's not appropriate for everyone, but will give people marketable skills that they can build a future on.
We want to make sure that every person coming out of high school either has a track through college,
right,
or a track through a marketable skill in the trade
Some
area.
development program, yeah, and a combination of I think classroom training and work experience, because the apprenticeship program, let's face it, I mean, for most of the world's workers, their relevant education normally occurs in the workplace. Training
Yes,
it's a very important and almost universal form of education, but we don't really take that much public responsibility for promoting that. And yet we need to do it. I mean, there was a great quote by a former Intel CEO who was talking about math skills. He said, you know, to work in a semiconductor factory, even as a production line worker, you need some basic skills in algebra.
Yes.
And he said, if our workers don't have that when they arrive, then we have to spend money training
them.
But if the government of Singapore teaches them how to do it in the classroom, they have that competitive advantage over us, because that's a cost that the semiconductor companies don't have to absorb. So we've got to find the right balance between public and private commitments to training, because at this stage, I mean, Steve Jobs said it very bluntly to Barack Obama. He says those jobs aren't coming back to the United States because our education system isn't producing production line workers with those kinds of quantitative skills. And we can't afford to educate them ourselves when they're already available at no additional cost.
Someplace else.
Right?
Yes.
Now, there are other issues, too, which have to do with kind of work culture, behavior in the workplace, how hard people work, et cetera, et cetera. Those are a little bit more amorphous, but the basic skills, we've got to remain competitive in this way. And not just in terms of producing college graduates. We need to be competitive in producing skilled workers who will never step on a college campus. And there are plenty of them in Europe. In the most competitive economies of the world, there are plenty of those people. We've kind of neglected the unskilled worker in our own education policy. We don't have a place for them right now. But the competitive European economies have figured that out. They are willing to invest in those workers because they know, as I said, that the only way to sustain higher incomes across the board is through skill-intensive education strategies. So in the U.S., we may be in the middle, in a sense, in terms of averages, but in fact, we're worse off because we really have just the two extremes. We have highly skilled workers and we have no skilled workers. Whereas the others in the middle, maybe more advanced European economies, have got more uniform skill sets and they can advance together. So you won't have these inequality issues in the same way. But
if the United States doesn't address this, we're going to have a more fragmented economy and society.
Definitely.
And we're going to have a middle class that is going to become weaker and weaker, and hence will go the United States with it.
It'll be harder and harder to sustain growth and the living standards that we want. But also, I think we can learn some lessons from the more successful competitors and improve outcomes for everybody.
We need to keep the land of opportunity as the land of opportunity.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Mary. Thank you.
In America's Deep South, a new industrial revolution is happening because of an amazing partnership between industry, government, and education. In Mississippi, they have rethought the idea of education. Dr. Raj Shanak of East Mississippi Community College joined us. Raj, as he's asked to be called, dreamed of a new type of educational system for the current unskilled worker class. He envisioned an environment where everyone had a place in the economic future if they desired to work. He envisioned an educational institution which embraced the new manufacturing floor and taught hands-on skills that created a new employable class of workers who embraced a new standard of lifelong learning as the standard to job success in the future. He envisioned a place where the middle class could flourish and compete globally by teaching skill sets for the high school graduate or those wanting to improve their skills or those who simply wanted a new career path. By saying thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate this. And I understand that you like to be just Raj.
That's what people call me, and that's easy you can't mess up that name, I hope.
Okay. Well, I would love to start out. You clearly have an enormous passion for both learning and teaching. Tell us a little bit about that. What inspired that?
No, of course, it was my parents, and having been through hard times in their own lives early on, they realized that education was the only way to enhance one's outlook in life and opportunities, and they valued education as the highest gift.
So tell us a little bit about your program here and how you are training not only youth to be prepared for the new manufacturing job, but also reskilling those that are entering possibly later in their career or upgrading their skills. You have so much opportunity you've created here for this group.
Absolutely. And it is all well and good for the young people to be trained and educated for the new jobs. But what if you are 45 years old and have worked at a Sara Lee or Bryan Foods in West Point, Mississippi, and your father worked there and your grandfather worked there, and now you got laid off, okay? In January of 2007, in West Point, Mississippi, a flagship for us, Bryan Foods, Sara Lee, a family-owned business that became part of Sara Lee Corporation, decided to shut down its plant, and 1,600 jobs were lost. Now, if you're 45 years old and you have worked there for 25, 27 years, you may or may not have a high school diploma.
Yes.
Okay, you are devastated. But our president charged us to spare no resources in making sure that we tooled up those people for the jobs that were emerging here. So East Mississippi Community College, we as a team not only comforted and counseled those middle-aged folks to see what was out there for them, but we also looked at ourselves and sought out what can we do, what kind of educational opportunities and training we can provide to these individuals, because they didn't have a long time for sustained education. They needed jobs quickly.
Quickly, yes.
So we, on the non-credit workforce side, we developed, working with our industry partners, we developed short-term training that could get those individuals meaningful jobs. So one of our things, besides having the passion and being community oriented, is that we are very flexible in meeting the demands of our employers while assuring individuals that if we were to follow this pathway, that there will be some meaningful opportunities for them.
Now, in the training that you're providing, you seem to be very successfully addressing the new manufacturing floor, which is very different from the one 30 years ago. And one of the things that I'd like you to talk to, if you could, is your ability to track these companies back, is because you have a workforce that is very effective on a per hour basis on efficiency. Could you speak to that?
Yes, ma'am. So modern manufacturing in the whole United States, and particularly in our region, is neither dumb for the dumb, neither dangerous. It definitely is not disappearing because of all the reshoring, and it's not dirty.
Right.
Okay?
The 4 Ds.
The 4 Ds.
They are gone.
They're gone. So the new manufacturing requires problem solving and critical thinking skills, and we have aligned programs to meet industry needs. So how do you do that? You meet with industry and you find out what their needs are. So we couldn't be all things to everyone. So my team, we worked with the industry sector, the manufacturing sector, to realize what were the commonalities for entry-level manufacturing jobs. And that was our first step. So we developed something called the Basic Manufacturing Skills Certificate that would help an individual get a foothold in an entry-level job. With the new businesses looking in this region, after American Eurocopter came here in 2003, they looked whether there was a trained and trainable workforce. and what were the capabilities of the educational institutions in this area to provide the necessary workforce. Every community in the United States has land, they have utilities, they have reasonable good infrastructure, roadways, and all that. The deciding factor becomes, do you have a trained and trainable workforce? Perhaps in your question, when you asked about efficiencies on an hourly basis, perhaps you didn't mean it, but I want to dispel the notion that the output per unit of hour is dependent upon the wage rates, and the wage rates are low here.
It is not.
The wages here are, I was in a conference just last 2 days. Many people have the notion that businesses are locating in our region because we are a low wage area.
And you clearly are not.
We are not, okay? An entry-level job at a Packard or a Eurocopter, perhaps I shouldn't name those names, okay, you know, pay higher than in the San Diego region for the same kind of companies. How do I know that? Because I partner with colleges in Maricosta, in Oceanside, and other places in the San Diego region, and I looked at what training opportunities they have and what the wages for those employees are at starting. Much to my surprise, as an economist, I realized that we pay 25 to 30% higher entry-level jobs. We pay higher here than they do in Southern California.
I was stunned to find similar information prior to this interview. What you've accomplished here is you've given people not only a job, you've completely changed their lifestyles for their entire family. Their standard of living is going up, their cost of living here is low. I mean, the more I read, Raj, the more impressed I was.
Yes, ma'am. It is absolutely true, because housing is an affordability index is there, but now those who partake in these opportunities can have a middle-class American dream.
One of the things I was so very impressed with studying your construction path and the speed by which it gained momentum was the exquisite cooperation between all those entities. You are unlike any triangle of government, business, and education that I've seen in the United States, because clearly you're all fond of one another, you know one another, you communicate frequently, and politics really just isn't tolerated. Let's get stuff done.
We compete on many things. We may compete on the football field, or athletics, band, or whatever else it is, okay? But when it comes to economic development, it is a team sport.
You're on the same team.
Workforce development is economic development.
Yes.
So our lines of communication are very open. Most have large egos, but they hide those and put them away.
They put them under control.
They put them under control because we all understand that collaboration is the only way to succeed.
As far as the average student coming through the system, how do they pay for the tuition?
Okay. We have a tuition guarantee working with our business and our local elected officials that anyone who finishes high school, if they graduate in the spring, May of that year, they can come to East Mississippi Community College for up to 2 years and do not have to pay any tuition. So that is a commitment to that group of people called students.
Yes.
They are in our educational pathway. Then we have many non-traditional individuals who may go into education, or they're looking for work-based learning. So those individuals may be here for a short duration, doing workforce training, to get into the workplace, or they may seek a career change and go into our educational environment. So we have individuals who are 35, 45, 60 years old who may be getting their GED because they didn't get it first.
Yes.
They may be becoming nurses. They may be becoming manufacturers, learning how to build helicopters or making steel. Okay? And so there's a credit, institutional credit program. This is the traditional student. And then there's the non-credit workforce development.
What are the proportions, the non-traditional versus the traditional?
Our average age of our student, after having told you that I don't like that term, I'm using it, is 28 years old. Those are the ones who are in our educational side. On the workforce side, we serve between 5,600 and 6,000 individuals a year, and they're more like 35 years old. There are two kinds of those individuals,
yes,
broadly speaking. Some are incumbent workers. They're already working somewhere.
They're wanting to enhance their skill sets.
They want to enhance their skill sets to move within the organization that they're working in, or they're seeking a career path change and upgrade their skills so they can partake in higher wage, higher skill jobs. So there's both the credit and non-credit, non-traditional student and the traditional student.
Tell me about K to Gray.
Okay. At our college, my president has allowed me to be a radical pragmatist. Okay?
Yes.
And that's what we are. We understand that people come from many different backgrounds. They have different needs. So we are very pragmatic in sitting with the individual, finding out what their needs are, do some intrusive counseling and navigation,
yes,
and show them opportunities that may exist if they took these different pathways.
they weren't necessarily aware of before.
That they weren't, there was perhaps secondary ignorance of what was available out there. Okay, so that's one of our qualities is we have intrusive counseling. We have navigators who spend time to find out where you are and to move you along your chosen pathways.
Well, Raj, it's very apparent you've been very successful in your life. You are here because you don't have to be, but because you want to be. And I just want to say, as a fellow economist, thank you for your passion, thank you for your vision, and especially thank you for having your heart of all those people that you're helping give a new standard of living to. It's exquisite.
Thank you very much. But, you know, I enjoyed my American dream. You know, born in Africa, lived in London, came with a suitcase full and $250 on that December 17th, 1972, for a 2-day trip to Atlanta the last 2 days. I took more than that. So this area has been, and the opportunities that have arisen here for me personally and my family, they have been tremendous. It can only happen in America.
This whole course has really given all of us a chance and an opportunity to pretty much broaden everything, you know, for us, to pretty much open the door for us to be into manufacturing. So it's been a fun course. It's been time consuming, but I think it's been worth it.
Then I left there and worked in the steel industry for a year, and biofuel for 2 years, and it went out of business. And it's 50 years old, look like I'm restarting, but the manufacturing skill helped me out a lot. It was challenging. It's sort of like a new beginning.
It was stressful, and I didn't make much money, And I hated it. So I wanted to work in manufacturing because I get to actually do something that will be, useful, first of all, because nobody listens to their math teacher. And, make decent money and also still have job security and all those things. I mean, it's just an upgrade.
Both Professor David Rowland Host and Dr. Raj Shanak warned us that the K through 12 grades cannot be ignored. We must start now to refocus the priorities of elementary and secondary education. The U.S. standings in math and science are slipping rapidly. Job skills such as being able to locate and understand written instruction is critical in the new competitive world. While Dr. Raj Shanak was so successful in marrying the focus and the resources of government, business, and education, he emphasized the time is now that we must take action in both high school and elementary schools. Next, we spoke with Macaulay Whitaker of the Golden Triangle Development Corporation in Columbus, Mississippi. One of Macaulay's many responsibilities at the Golden Triangle is to be a resource to the local elementary and high schools, to foster educational curriculum needed to encourage STEM education in order to create employable skill sets. Her story and insights are only re-emphasizing the immediate need to rethink education.
Hi. Could you start out today and tell us what your main focus here is at the Golden Triangle Development Corporation? It's related to the educational piece?
As far as education and workforce development are related, the two are intertwined quite a bit, and we're hoping to, for our purposes as an economic development organization, to create a pipeline of trained individuals. Now, we currently have in place programming at the community college level that goes up to the four-year college level as well. What we're doing is working backwards. We know that we have a certain number of jobs here that are currently under construction, that are coming. We know that we'll continue to recruit jobs, but we have a limited pool of individuals who are trained. And what we are seeing in the future is that the more jobs we have, our community's not growing as much. It's kind of an if you build it, they will come scenario. If once we get the jobs, people move, but in order to recruit them, you've got to have a certain threshold of your population. But not just bodies, we need those people to be trained as well. And certain companies define their trainability in different ways, but almost all of them center around something called work keys testing, which is the ACT equivalent for technical programming. And what we are starting out here is to implement work keys testing in every high school in the Golden Triangle. So that's 3 counties, Lyons, Clay, and Oktibbeha.
And what does the work key testing involve? What are the skill sets that you're looking for? And
Sure. Work keys testing covers 3 components: locating information, reading for information, and then a technical math component as well. That 3-portion test makes up something that they consider to be your evaluation of trainability. The higher you score on a work keys test, the more trainable you are, so to speak.
So the more suitable you are?
Well, the more you're able to be trained to do. The higher your level of ability and what a company can train you to perform.
Now, ideally, since clearly you're going to have a very competitive job element coming up in the future, as you attract more business, you need to attract even a bigger and larger, better equipped workforce. How far down are you going within the school system to start not only this evaluative process, but the training itself?
Absolutely. The training will start that actual testing and training in the high school level. But what we are encouraging our school systems to do is to really focus on implementing STEM education as part of their overall curriculum. Almost all of our schools have a STEM course. They have a STEM elective that you can take, but what we want them to focus on is that STEM, science, technology, education, and math. STEM education is it's a paradigm. It's a total mind frame that our schools have to approach. You can use STEM focuses, so to speak, in your English classes, in your history classes. The liberal arts are absolutely affected by the way that STEM affects the way that you teach, the way that students think. This critical thinking, this locating for information type thinking is something that can start as early as junior high. In K through third grade, what we would do is expose those young students to opportunities and different fields here. We are currently in process constructing what we call a communiversity. This is a CMTE 2.0. You spoke with Dr. Raj Shanik before. The Center for Manufacturing Technology Excellence is currently at East Mississippi Community College. They're booked, they're out of room, and so we are looking to expand that at a much larger facility with more training bays. A portion of that is going to be a museum. We'll actually have a museum here, an interactive museum where students of all ages can go to experience what we have here in the Golden Triangle. That means that they're going to be able to get in a large truck and look at an engine from PACCAR. That means that they'll have a tire display and what tires are made of, and sort of a component display for Yokohama. It will be that they get to see some steel and how heavy it is and how hot it needs to be poured, so that they can understand what it means to work at Steel Dynamics Incorporated. So we'll expose them early on to things that are here.
Whet their appetite while they're young.
You know, get them when they're little. At that point, everything is neat and cool, and you can touch it. It's not just this big plant that you drive by on your way to wherever you're going, but it's something that you've seen and you're exposed to. Moving on to the middle school, junior high range, our state has implemented what we call pathways in the school system, and so I believe there's 13 pathways. Some of these are STEM related. You've got your technology pathway, there's an engineering pathway. We're recommending that those students continue on those pathways while still getting exposure through the communiversity, through their schools, through electives, through robotics competitions. That's where that STEM focus really gets to be important, because they're finding out, okay, well, I'm going to start on this pathway and go this way. Once they get to high school, continuing on their selected pathway, they will be able to take the Work Keys test just as they could take the ACT. We recommend they take both. Why not? It is not an either-or option anymore. Technological education is very important. It's a very viable career path. And what we are hoping to impress upon these students and their families is that it's not what you do if you couldn't do the other. This is a two-year program is not a choice that you don't have necessarily. It's a choice that you make because you're going to make a great deal of money.
Now, putting this program together, what was your greatest challenge? Was it the acceptance? Was it actually drafting the curriculum? What were the things that you faced that you could help others along the way?
I mean, every program has challenges, but I think the greatest thing, it's a mindset, and it's not something that's local. This is a national, global mindset. It's the mindset of what community college means. It's still college. For a very, very long time, it was 4 years or bust.
Yes.
And if you didn't have a 4-year degree, then you weren't going to be able to get a job. And then it kind of morphed, well, if you don't have either your MBA or a master's degree in something, you don't have a leg up either. And if you can't cut it in the real world, you're just going to go get a 2-year degree. That is no longer the case. I myself have taken this Work Keys test. I've taken some of the coursework that you have to do. It is very difficult. It is not a program if you can't do. Advanced manufacturing is just that. It is advanced.
It takes skills to do it.
We use a term here as widget and squidget. It's no longer going in and putting washers on a rod. It's no longer just hammering away. You're working with things like robots. There are majors called mechatronics, where you have someone who is in charge of keeping the symphony of robots going. You have full facilities that are simply run by a robotic structure, and there are people that control those. Those are not jobs for people who couldn't do
basic
something.
math. Yes,
these are jobs for people who are highly skilled, who are looking to have better careers with longevity, who are looking to increase their abilities through their jobs. But that's the biggest challenge, is overcoming the perception that it's those who can't do the 2-year, and those who can go on to 4-year.
But now, when you started this program, is it a 1 county, 3 county? Tell us a little bit about the depth and the size of where you started with this.
Absolutely. We cover 3 counties. The Golden Triangle is a term that refers to Starkville, Columbus, and West Point, Mississippi. So that is our focus, would be the Golden Triangle, 3 communities there. But it's an open door policy here. If another county calls and says, hey, we really like what you're doing, we'll absolutely come up, walk around with me, let's talk, let's see how you can replicate this as well.
Macaulay, tell us about the companies, the names of the companies that have just recently moved in within the last 5 to 7 years. So people have an understanding of the depth and size of what you've done in this Golden Triangle.
Sure, absolutely. The majority of our focus, we very recently became a 3-county organization, so the majority of our locations have been in Lowndes County. We do have one in West Point. Yokohama Tire Corporation is our most recent company. We have CalStar. They make brick pavers, but it's sort of an eco-friendly production process that they use. We have PACCAR Engine Company. They do engine work for Peterbilt and other engine corporations. We have Steel Dynamics Incorporated, which is a steel manufacturing facility. We have Weyerhaeuser Paper Products. That's one of our oldest facilities, but still a very, very large part of our community, very important
piece.
We have Airbus helicopters here. They make helicopters. We have Stark Aerospace. They do a lot of unmanned vehicular construction, a lot of government contracts there. Namotally is a defense corporation that they make weapons here. So it is a very, very diverse group of people that we have, of industries have. There's a wide variety of things to be trained in.
Now, in the future, do you see some of these people from industry becoming some of the instructors and coming into even younger years in the classroom and encouraging them? How are you going to tie the younger years and the businesses and the community university all into one?
Well, we do that now, actually. We encourage all of our industries to provide access. If a student can't come to your plant, let's bring your plant to the student, whether it's an engineer that's going to a science class at a junior high to do an experiment for the day, or you're going to an elementary course to show them what it means to hold an airplane that flies with remote controls. This is a grown-up remote airplane kind of thing. We really do encourage that these people sort of come out of their facilities, get in touch with the education system here, and give it a face. Show it that they're real people. These are people that you know. They're working here, they're doing really cool things, and that you can do that too.
You know what's so wonderful about this? You're getting back to a community where your dad or your mom went to work there and you grew up in an area, and to continue to have that standard of living, you don't have to move.
Absolutely.
You get to grow up and stay in your community. That's a sweet part of America that we've missed, and that educational system, you're bringing it back,
Absolutely.
that possibility.
At some basic level, everybody either wants to go home or take a part of home with them. I mean, if you're able to not have to leave, and that's the big thing.
So Macaulay, when you were implementing this program into schools or introducing them, tell us a little bit about the freedom that each individual school had to design their specific classroom environment, their specific curriculum, and what kind of challenges or resistance did you meet in doing this? Because this is somewhat new. Yeah, you had to have some issues that popped up and said, we can work through this.
As with any new program. And then that may be sort of a misnomer in that it's a program that we've created. This is not a program we're implementing in all of our schools here. We are encouraging our schools to embrace these concepts. They can do so however they see fit. I'll use WorkKeys as an example. We are encouraging them to implement WorkKeys testing at the junior and senior level for their students. We are assisting them to do so however it best fits in their curriculum. Some of our schools are testing during the school week, and they're implementing a prep course during school hours. Other schools are doing a Saturday testing day, and then they are implementing an after-school study course. We are training some of their teachers to do so. We are providing some teachers from EMCC to do those prep courses. So what we're doing is saying, here's the end goal. What we really want to happen is that we're getting students prepped for employability once they leave high school.
So
how you want to get there is totally up to you, because that way it's most effective. we want it to be sustainable. We want it to be part of your annual budget. Let's not use grant funds, which are fantastic and allow our schools to do a ton of stuff. They're limited in their time frame. They're not always renewable. So we really want this to be part of what you do every year in your annual budget. There's our line item for workforce development in our schools.
A permanent change to a portion of the focus of the educational piece.
All of it being a sustainable process. Pipelines are consistent. Pipelines are all the time. Pipelines are cyclical. They're running. We always have to have this happening here. If you stop at any level, then there's no point whatsoever. You stop at the high school level, then there's no point in getting those kids STEM exposed. If you stop at the third grade level, then there's, where are they going to go from there? This has to be a constant stream of education. This has to be a constant stream of our focus on not only getting these students employed, but making sure they have places to work when they leave school.
Macaulay, thank you so much for your time.
And
especially thank you for being such an inspiring leader.
Well, we thank you for coming to the Golden Triangle. I mean, we think we're doing great things here, but we really want to share with anyone out there that, we're doing it here in Mississippi. It's a shocker. We have shoes on, and we're doing some really awesome things in economic development and workforce development, and we invite anyone to come down and take a look. And
what you've done here is extraordinarily impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
The U.S. can and must rethink education as a whole. The East Mississippi Golden Triangle should be used as a model for that process. Leaders here were more interested in creating positive change than any other political objective. They realized and accepted that only they could create the change they needed within their community to turn it around. They knew education was the key and committed themselves to do whatever was necessary to create a new educational system that created opportunity for all and for all those who were willing to give their best in return. They knew that what people hungered for was an opportunity for a career with a livable wage. So in our next series, The Re-Educated Workforce, we're about to show you what can happen after government, business, and education has worked together. A phoenix can emerge out of the ashes of laid-off manufacturing workers when given the opportunity to have usable job skills. Both the college-bound and the skill-bound can create a new American economy where the middle class can flourish and American competitiveness can reshore American manufacturing jobs once again. Rethinking education is what America needs to do to save the middle class.